everyone, welcome to another fic read by Audio Lover. Today we'll be reading Speaking with Serpents by heliantheae. A summary, in which Harry would like nothing more than to become a world-renowned herpetologist, and he won't let a little thing like the existence of magic get in his way. If that means attending a school called Hogwarts, and really, how is he supposed to frame that on his college applications? Then so be it. Rating is teen and up audience. Archive warning, no archive warning is apply. Category is MM. Fandom is, of course, Harry Potter. Relationships, Sirius Black and Remus Lupin. Characters, Harry Potter, Minerva McGonagall, Amelia Bones, Remus Lupin, Sirius Black, Miss Granger, Nymphadora Tonks, Basilisk, Oliver Wood. Additional tags, snakes, Parseltongue, implied reference to child abuse. Crack treated seriously, Hogwarts first year, alternate universe, canon divergence. Language is English. This fic contains 85,000 words and 38 chapters. Ooh, this is gonna take a while. Alright, author notes. Me, writes nothing for more than a month. Also me, instead of finishing literally anything, why not something new? Anyway, this is incredibly self-indulgent and I'm having a good time. I'll finish it sometime in the next 5 years, probably. Chapter 1. In the beginning. The thin, bespectacled boy spent every single recess crouched next to the chain-linked fence that separated the playground from an empty, overgrown lot. After ascertaining that he wasn't relieving himself or burning ants with a magnifying glass, the playground monitors left him to it. "The Potter boy is still at it?" Carol asked when she arrived for duty. Susan made a vague gesture without looking up from the battered paperback she was reading. "He's not hurting anyone." "Still, he's a bit odd, isn't he?" "Oh, I don't know. Children go through phases. My youngest wouldn't shut up about dinosaurs at that age." It had been quite a while since Susan's youngest was that age, but she had spent an entire summer making weekly trips to London's Natural History Museum. The memory stuck. Carol wrinkled her nose. "Dinosaurs are all very well, but snakes?" She shuddered. "They make my skin crawl." "He'll be England's next great naturalist, or he'll be in prison by the time he's 20, Susan predicted, as she turned a page. Oblivious to the fact that he was the cause of a great deal of gossip, consternation, and interest among the staff members at his primary school, Harry Potter continued his conversation with an elderly grass snake. Well, it was less of a conversation and more of a lecture. Harry didn't mind. He learned more from the snake in the past 10 minutes than he had all morning in class. "Compost heaps are the best place to lay eggs. Decomposing matter gives off heat, so they stay warmer in case of cold snaps. England has plenty of those," Harry agreed wisely. He knew that the many intricacies and failings of the English weather were a favorite topic of conversation among adults, humans and snakes alike. "Horrible frigid island," said the snake. "I'm not as young as I used to be, you know. My bones ache in the cold." Harry had broken his collarbone when Dudley pushed him down the stairs last year, was no stranger to aching bones. He frowned down at the snake. "I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do to help?" "It's kind of you to offer, but no, you are so very, very young." "What does that have to do with anything?" The snake raised her head and flicked his arm with her tongue. "Some day, likely soon, I will go to the land of eternal winter. My bones will not ache then, and I'll sleep peacefully." "You're going to Norway?" Harry asked, alarmed. He'd seen part of a documentary about Scandinavia on the telly while stuck at Mrs. Figg's, so he knew all about Norway. It seemed like a very long way to go for some sleep, and the snake didn't even like cold weather. "Oh, child," the snake hissed a sigh. "Not Norway. The land of eternal winter is where snakes go when we die." "Why didn't you say so? I know all about death." "Do you?" Harry nodded. "Of course. My parents are dead. Do you think you'll see them there?" "Perhaps. I don't know where humans go when they die. Were they speakers like you?" "I don't know. They died when I was really little." "Well," said the snake, "if I see them, I'll tell them all about you. How's that?" "Only the good things." If snakes could roll their eyes, this one would. "Only the good things. Now your outdoor time is almost over. You had better go line up with the other children." "Goodbye." "Goodbye," said the snake. Harry's obsession with snakes only grew as he aged. By the time he was 10, he had read every single book about snakes in both the school library and the local public libraries that were within walking distance. He knew everything there was to know about England's 3 native snake species, the grass snake, the common European adder, and the smooth snake, or, as they were also known, Natrix natrix, Viperberus, and Coronilla austriaca. The grass snake and the smooth snake were cousins, sort of since they were both in the family Colubridae. The adder fell into the Viperdae family, so they were different. Harry loved all of them, although taxonomy made his head hurt. Aunt Petunia had put him in charge of all garden-related activities as soon as he was old enough to tell an ornamental plant from a weed, which meant he spent long hours every summer pulling weeds and conversing with various snakes, As long as the garden was aesthetically pleasing by the end of the day, Aunt Petunia left him in peace. That meant that she was blissfully unaware of the clutches of grass snake eggs incubating in her compost heap. There weren't any adders or smooth snakes living in the yard. Vipers shied away from humans, uninterested in being killed because people feared their venom. Harry thought the hysteria surrounding them was a bit ridiculous. Common European adders had only killed 14 people since 1876, far fewer than were killed by horse-drawn carriages, volcanoes, or vending machines in a given year. The smooth snakes preferred less manicured areas like heathland. Nothing of the sort could be found on Privet Drive. Still, the two species occasionally visited. Being able to talk to a human, even a small, sweaty one, was something of a novelty for them. Apparently, being able to talk to snakes wasn't a common ability. Before, several snakes assured Harry that he was the only one they spoke with. He had thought it was one of those things everyone did, but no one talked about. Like scratching themselves in public, or just eating a sweet, even if there was a little bit of the wrapper still stuck to it. He'd never read about anyone talking to snakes either, unless Eve from the Bible counted. Grass snakes were considered sacred by Baltic pagans. He once made the mistake of informing a grass snake. Snakes were, from the bottoms of their cold, reptilian hearts, incredibly vain creatures. If ego were a thing scientists could quantify, they would be shocked at the results fielded by the Privet Drive grass snake population. You're not properly a constrictor since you don't kill your prey that way. You just subdue it, he apologetically informed the nearby smooth snakes. But you give birth to live young, and that's pretty cool. Harry, having seen the process, would much rather everything just hatch out of an egg. He didn't tell the smooth snakes that, though. Adders are the only species of snake found in Scotland, he told the adders, and 12% of adder bites result in hospitalization. This wouldn't be a problem if humans just left us alone. One particularly prickly male sighed. Harry's oddities didn't end with speaking to snakes, to the outrage of the Dursleys and his own general chagrin. No, strange things happened to Harry all the time. Some of them were useful, like being able to heat rocks for his reptilian friends, or disappearing and finding himself somewhere new when Dudley was after him. If he really concentrated, he could even unlock the door on his cupboard at night. But that always gave him a headache the way reading a dense book did. Mostly, his talents were baffling. He turned a teacher's hair blue and grown his hair back after Aunt Petunia shaved most of his head. He had once shrunk a horrible brown sweater she had been trying to foist off on him. Another time, he stopped a pan full of hot bacon grease from slopping down his front. It's not that he wasn't grateful for his strange abilities. They'd saved him a lot of trouble and even a few third-degree burns. And he liked being able to help the snakes, but he wouldn't mind being normal. The Dursleys might like him better that way, at the very least. At any rate, normalcy wasn't something Harry was destined for. The fact was confirmed for him when an owl dropped a letter on his head several days before his 11th birthday. The grass snake he'd been talking to disappeared in a cloud of colorful language and refused to come out, even when Harry assured her that the bird was gone. "Suit yourself," he told the snake, and he tucked the letter in his shirt for further examination later. That night, safely ensconced within his cupboard, Harry fished the letter out of his shirt with slightly more sweat stains than it had previously sported, but otherwise none the worse for wear. Mr. H. Potter, The Cupboard Under the Stairs, 4 Privet Drive, Little Winging, Surrey. He was skeptical by nature, stemming from a combination of nothing ever having gone right in his entire life, and a keen interest in the scientific method, mostly the former if he was honest with himself, though he rarely made the effort, and the letter seemed worthy of skepticism. Whoever had written it knew where he slept, which was unsettling. He wasn't aware of anyone save the Dursleys that knew about his cupboard, but the letter had been delivered by an owl. Animals didn't like the Dursleys. They were wiser than most people that way. The contents of the letter were even less helpful than the address. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Sorcerer, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confederation of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. The term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than the 31st of July. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Harry flipped to the enclosed shopping list and frowned down at it. Assuming this wasn't a hoax, and he was reserving judgment, none of this would be readily available at the local grocery store. And what did Minerva McGonagall mean when she said she awaited his owl? Was he supposed to catch an owl and somehow convince it to take a letter back to her? Was it some sort of admittance exam? Well, Harry supposed, there wasn't any time like the present. He glared at the lock on his cupboard until it clicked, then crept out into the hallway. His head throbbed, but in the dim light, it was bearable. His first step toward potential wizardry, rather than just general freakishness, was to find a pen and write back to this McGonagall woman. He did so on the back of the envelope his letter came in, not wanting to risk the Dursleys noticing paper missing. It wouldn't be worth the screaming. Dear Deputy Headmistress McGonagall, I received your owl admitting me to Hogwarts, but I am not sure what it means. I don't have any money either. Do you offer scholarships for tuition and supplies? Sincerely, Harry Potter. Hogwarts was probably a boarding school, he reasoned, if students were allowed to bring pets. He would really like to attend a boarding school. 9 months away from the Dursleys sounded like heaven. He slipped out the back door and went to where the grass snakes nested under the shed. Grass snakes are diurnal, meaning they were awake during the day like people were. Harry felt a little bad about knocking on the side of the shed. Hello? Sorry to bother you. A few moments later, the grouchiest of the older snakes emerged. Harry bit back a sigh. That was just his luck. What do you want? I was wondering if you could tell me where to find an owl. Why in the name of everything holy would I want to do that? I need to mail a letter. The snake appeared to consider it. It was an odd request, Harry knew, but snakes didn't particularly care about things like logic and social norms. A universality proved when this particular snake said, Very well. There's a nest of barn owls that live in an abandoned church 3 miles west of here. They're the closest. Thank you, Harry said to the snake, who slithered back under the shed instead of replying. He sighed to himself and began walking in the direction the snake had indicated. The trek took an hour and a half. The suburbs were quiet at night, the dark interrupted by streetlights and the flickering glow from the occasional television. Harry disturbed a stray cat and a horde of rats while creeping through an alley, but the walk was otherwise uneventful. When he finally arrived at the abandoned church, and really, if that wasn't material for a horror film, Harry didn't know what was. He took a moment to look around. Ominous shadows? Check. Graveyard? Check. A sign warning that the building was structurally unsound? Check. For the first time since receiving the letter, Harry stopped to consider whether this was a good idea. Then he thought about 9 months away from the Dursleys, even at a school where everyone thought they were a wizard, and decided that it was worth a shot. He had to crawl through a broken stained-glass window to get into the church, since some enterprising individual had decided to discourage teenage shenanigans by nailing the door shut. He made it through without any new cuts or scrapes, which boded well for continuing to avoid tetanus. Then he spent several seconds examining the miscellaneous collection of beer cans and cigarette stubs he landed amongst, after jumping down from the window ledge. That enterprising individual had evidently failed. He glanced around. Beer cans, a presumably used syringe, and 2 glowing eyes. That was promising. Hello? Harry said. Who? Oh, I'm Harry. Harry Potter. Who? Right, you wouldn't know me. I live over on Priv Drive. I'm almost 11, and I like snakes. I was wondering if you'd be willing to deliver a letter. Who? Oh yeah, I suppose owls can't read, so you don't know who it's addressed to. Her name is weird. Something like an M? Minerva McGonagall? So she's probably Scottish, I think. She's the deputy headmistress of Hogwarts? Who? I know it's kind of a stupid name. They're wizards or something. A big barn owl swooped silently out of the eaves and landed on the pew closest to Harry. Who? He offered the owl the envelope. The owl stared at it. You don't have hands, Harry said, realizing another flaw with his plan. The owl looked patronizing, if that was possible. It hopped closer, grabbed the letter in its beak, and took off. Harry hoped that meant it would take the letter to Scotland and not drop it in a field somewhere the first time it spotted a mouse. He took his time wandering back to Priv Drive, not eager to lock himself back in his cupboard. That's why he was meandering through an empty playground near midnight when a tall, imposing woman appeared out of nowhere, directly in the center of a merry-go-round. To her credit, she didn't stumble, and it only took her a moment to get her bearings. You, she said, pointing at Harry imperiously. Me? He asked, although it wasn't as if there was anyone else around that she could be talking to. She really was intimidating. Her hair was black, shot through with gray, and pulled back into a tight bun. She was wearing what looked like Mrs. Figg's dining room curtains, complete with a faint satiny floral pattern on an otherwise matte background. Are you Harry Potter? She inquired. You must be. You look just like James. Who? Harry asked blankly, sounding rather like an owl himself. James, the woman replied slowly. James Potter. You are Harry Potter, aren't you? Well, yes, said Harry. Who are you? I'm Minerva McGonagall. I received your owl. He thought it would take much longer to reach Scotland, but perhaps that was part of the wizardry. Oh, good. I wasn't sure the owl would find you. So this was Minerva McGonagall. Other than the weird drape dress, she didn't look much like a wizard. She wasn't even wearing a hat. Post owls are very intelligent, Mr. Potter. Harry made the executive decision not to tell her he had accosted a random, likely unemployed owl in an abandoned church. Right, he said. So, why are you here? McGonagall pulled a crumpled envelope out of her robe. She smoothed it out to reveal his letter. Would you mind answering a few questions, Harry? She asked in that horrible, gentle tone of voice adults used when they were trying to figure if something was terribly wrong. Harry repressed the urge to sigh. 9 months without the Dursleys, he reminded himself. Okay. You're living with your mother's sister, aren't you? Petunia? Harry nodded. Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. Do they treat you well? Harry followed her gaze to the part of the envelope that contained words like cupboard and under the stairs. Perhaps writing on the back of the envelope hadn't been the best idea, but he'd been hoping to avoid a lecture about how ungrateful and expensive he was. They could be worse? Did they tell you anything about your parents? Who they were? How they died? Back on stable ground, Harry nodded. In a car accident. My dad was drunk. In her... McGonagall's lips thinned to a point of invisibility. Would you like to get dinner, Harry? It's midnight. Yes, it is. Harry shrugged. It wasn't as if he had much to lose. Half an hour later, and one very discombobulating trip through space, time? An unsettling combination of the two? Harry found himself eating French toast and frowning at McGonagall, while she daintily tucked into a strawberry crepe. The crepe was a point in her favor. The Dursleys disapproved of foreign food. The utter nonsense she was spewing in between bites was less encouraging. Surely you've made something odd happen when you were upset? She pressed. Harry thought about turning his teacher's hair blue. He thought about shrinking that horrible sweater. What about when I'm not upset? I can talk to snakes even when I'm happy. Do you mean stuff like that? A lifetime of watching Uncle Vernon for the slightest sign of an impending explosion meant that Harry saw McGonagall's hand tighten imperceptibly on her fork. He eyed her warily. That's a rather unusual skill, she said slowly. What do the snakes tell you? Lots of stuff, Harry said cautiously. Unique wasn't a good thing in his experience. They complain about the weather. They talk about good places to lay in the sun. She appeared to relax slightly, which was a relief. You don't use them to spy on people. What does a snake want to spy on people for? Harry asked. They have better things to do. And so, quite frankly, did Harry. People were all very well, except when they weren't, which was usually, but they had nothing on snakes. McGonagall appeared to shake herself, reminiscent of a cat that had stepped in a puddle. You're right, Harry. I'm being daft. For a moment you reminded me of someone. No one good? Harry hazarded. No one good, McGonagall agreed darkly, then seemed to remember that she was talking to a 10-year-old. At any rate, you're a wizard, Harry. Okay, said Harry. Is that why you can teleport? He'd been skeptical about the whole wizard thing, but he really couldn't think of any other explanation for that nauseating little experience. Operate, McGonagall corrected. It's the wizarding version of having a driver's license, essentially. And yes. My parents were wizards, weren't they? What did my dad need to be driving drunk for, then? Harry asked, feeling a flare of some sort of unpleasant emotion. If his parents could teleport, there was no reason for them to have died in a car accident, thus leaving him with the Dursleys. I don't think James even knew how to drive a car. Lily did, but she hated to. Neither of them were much for drinking. It was too dangerous to dull your reflexes back then. Here McGonagall paused, and then she sighed. Your parents were murdered, Harry, by a very bad man. Murdered? That was alarming. Most of Harry's alarm probably showed on his face because McGonagall continued hurriedly. There was a war. A man, you know who, we call him. Speaking his name was taboo and remains unwise. Wanted to cleanse the wizarding world of those he deemed to be impure. Your parents, myself, and many others objected, rather strenuously. Your parents were heavily involved in the resistance movement. Eventually, you know who decided they were important enough to warrant killing. He went to your home Halloween night of 1981 and killed them. Where was I? It seemed odd that a baby would survive something that killed two people who were essentially soldiers. Oh, Harry. Now McGonagall looked sad. You were there. He tried to kill you too, we think, but something went wrong. He was killed instead. I killed him? Harry asked, even more alarmed. It was a welcome distraction from feeling relieved that his parents had been murdered rather than being killed, and by extension abandoning him to the Dursleys by their own irresponsible choices. No one is quite sure. Personally, I suspect your mother did. Lily always was clever. That made much more sense, and Harry said as much. Yes, well, said McGonagall, there are those who believe it was you, and they're rather enthusiastic in their belief. They call you the boy who lived. That's stupid, Harry decided. The words escaped before he could stop them. He flinched, tempted to clap a hand over his mouth, but McGonagall didn't seem upset. Instead, she inclined her head slightly. Be that as it may, that's why you were given to the Dursleys to raise. It was deemed safer for you. Harry thought about the various bones he'd broken, the nights he'd gone hungry, and long days locked in his cupboard. They must be dangerous, he said doubtfully. Less so than your current guardians, I suspect. I told Albus they were the worst sort of muggles. Tell me, Harry, she said, leaning forward. She was very intense. Would you want to live somewhere else? With someone else? Yes. Sure, Harry said. When can we leave? McGonagall blinked. Then she said something that sounded odd and produced a spectral silver tabby cat. Amelia, it's Minerva, our usual place. Don't the, muggles notice? That sort of thing? Does this look like a muggle establishment? Harry glanced around. He had been focused on trying to decide what to order that wouldn't upset McGonagall. How expensive was too expensive? Did she disapprove of foreign food? Would she be affronted if he ordered something too cheap? And then he'd been focused on inhaling his French toast before she could change her mind about feeding him. Now that he was looking, though, most of the people in the restaurant were also dressed like someone had stolen all their clothing and forced them to wrap themselves in the curtains. There were candles everywhere, too. In retrospect, it was rather obvious. No? No, McGonagall confirmed. So, the Wizarding world isn't that different from the Muggle world? There are some notable cultural differences. Think of it as traveling to a foreign country without leaving Britain. Is there a travel guide, or a teleprogram I could watch? Harry asked. That's not a bad idea, a woman said. Harry twitched violently and his fork clattered loudly. Sorry, dear, she added. I didn't mean to startle you. Amelia, thank you for coming so quickly. This is Harry Potter." The woman eyed Harry with renewed interest. She wasn't as tall as McGonagall, but she exuded an air of authority from the tips of her pointy leather boots to the roots of her auburn hair. "Is he really?" Yes," said Harry when both of the women stared at him. "And you have him because—" "Irregularities with his Hogwarts letter," McGonagall said promptly. "After his mother's sister, who had been next in line to be his guardian?" "Let's see," said Amelia, pulling a file out of nowhere and making Harry blink. "Sirius Black, Marlene McKinnon, Mary McDonald, Alice Longbottom, Peter Pettigrew, Frank Longbottom, Petunia Dursley. She's the last on the list." "What about Remus?" McGonagall wanted to know. Harry listened with interest. He had yet to be impressed with any of the adults in his life, and none of the people on the list had apparently wanted him. But he wasn't a baby anymore. Some people didn't like babies, he knew, but he could take care of himself now. He mostly just needed somewhere to sleep, and he didn't even take up that much space. "What about Remus's condition?" Amelia returned. "It's manageable with wolfsbane." "Legally. Legally, the Ministry would rather abandon war orphans than see them with a caring guardian if that guardian was a werewolf." "Minerva." "Don't Minerva me," said McGonagall. "You know I don't agree with all the Ministry policies." McGonagall presented her with a trump card, the envelope with Harry's mailing address on it. "I told Albus they were the worst sort of muggles." "Fine," said Amelia, although she didn't sound happy about it. Harry considered telling them that the cupboard really wasn't so bad. It was downright tolerable compared to going hungry or the time he had to relocate his own shoulder after Uncle Vernon had wrenched his arm particularly violently, but decided against it. Anyway, Amelia was still talking. "Where's Remus these days?" "He'll be here shortly," McGonagall said, sounding incredibly pleased with herself. "You don't have to stay with Remus if you don't want to, Harry. We can find someone else. He was one of your father's closest friends, though, so I thought he would be a good place to start." Harry, who had been half listening while sneaking sugar packets and the little containers of jelly that restaurants have into his pockets, looked up guiltily. "What?" "You don't have to stay with anyone you don't want to," McGonagall said. "Amelia will file some creative paperwork, whatever you decide." "Do you know how many years in Azkaban I'd be sentenced to if the Ministry knew half of what I've done for you?" Amelia muttered. "A good thing you're the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, then, isn't it?" McGonagall asked archly. "Ah, here's Remus." Hooray! That is the end of Chapter 1. Chapter 2 is Introducing Remus Lupin. Thanks for listening. I will see you in the next chapter.